Welcome to Dingleberry Lane. It's a funny place. Houses are bright colors, people are even brighter. And the animals? Don't even get me started. Our hero? He's a little guy named Silas. Silas is always getting into funny situations. Stay tuned for some hilarious tales from Dingleberry Lane. One day, Silas woke up with a cold. His nose was red, his nose was runny, but then, something crazy happened. His nose started to run. Literally, it bounced off the wall, it zoomed past the dog. Poor Silas, he just wanted his nose back. Silas chased his nose all over Dingleberry Lane. He ran past Mrs. Grumbly's prize-winning tulips. He even bumped into the mailman, sending letters flying everywhere. Finally, Silas's nose stopped. It landed right back on his face. Silas was just glad to have his nose back, even if it was still runny. Mrs. Peabody was known for her delicious pies. Apple, blueberry, pecan, you name it, she baked it. Silas loved Mrs. Peabody's pies. One day he smelled something amazing. It was Mrs. Peabody's famous apple pie cooling on the windowsill. Silas had to have a bite. He snuck into her kitchen and took a big bite. Suddenly, the pie started to shake. It jumped off the windowsill and ran away. Silas couldn't believe it. Now he had to catch a runaway pie. He chased it through the park, past the duck pond and straight into a picnic. The picnickers were surprised to see a pie running around. They were even more surprised when Silas took a bite out of it. Everyone knows cats don't fly, but in Dingleberry Lane, anything is possible. One day, Silas was playing in his backyard. He saw Mr. Whiskers, the neighbor's cat, napping in a tree. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew Mr. Whiskers right out of the tree. Mr. Whiskers soared through the air. He floated over the houses. He even did a loop-de-loop around the church steeple. Silas couldn't believe his eyes. Mr. Whiskers, the cat who hated heights, was flying. Just as suddenly, the wind stopped. Mr. Whiskers landed with a soft thud right back in the tree. He pretended nothing had happened. Silas just shook his head and laughed. Only in Dingleberry Lane. Section 5. The day the music died and came back to life. Dingleberry Lane loved music. Every Saturday the town square came alive with singing and dancing. But one Saturday something strange happened. The music stopped. The instruments wouldn't play a single note. The townspeople were devastated. What would they do without their music? Silas decided to investigate. He checked the instruments, but they weren't broken. He asked the birds to sing, but they just chirped sadly. Just when all hope seemed lost, Silas heard a faint sound. It was coming from his belly? He had a bad case of the hiccups, and each hiccup sounded like a musical note. Silas's hiccups became the music. The townspeople were so happy to have music back, they even started dancing along to Silas's unique rhythm. Section 6. Fashion Fiasco. Silas's worst nightmare. Silas wasn't known for his fashion sense. In fact, he was infamous for his quirky and often mismatched outfits. His friends would often joke about his unique style, but Silas didn't mind. He wore what made him comfortable, even if it meant sporting mismatched socks and inside-out shirts. He was more of a mismatched socks and inside-out shirt kind of guy. His wardrobe was a colorful array of patterns and textures that never quite matched, but somehow, it all seemed to work for him. Silas had a carefree attitude towards fashion, and it showed in his everyday attire. But one day, he decided to dress to impress. It was a special occasion, and Silas wanted to make a good impression. He rummaged through his closet, searching for something that would stand out in a good way. After much deliberation, he finally settled on his best and only suit. He put on his best and only suit. It was a bit snug and slightly outdated, but it was the best he had. Silas carefully adjusted the suit, making sure everything was in place. He wanted to look his best for what he had planned. He even tried to tame his unruly hair. It was a battle he often lost. But today, he was determined. With a comb in hand and a bit of gel, Silas did his best to smooth down the wild strands. It wasn't perfect, but it was a significant improvement. Today was the day he would ask his crush, Penny, to the school dance. Silas had been planning this for weeks, and now, the moment had finally arrived. He felt a mix of excitement and nervousness as he held a bouquet of flowers, hoping Penny would say yes. He walked down the street feeling confident. The sun was shining and everything seemed to be going his way. Silas took a deep breath, trying to calm his nerves. He rehearsed what he would say to Penny in his mind, determined to make a good impression. That is, until he tripped and fell into a mud puddle. His suit was ruined. In an instant, all his hard work seemed to be for nothing. Silas sat in the mud, feeling a mix of frustration and embarrassment. How could this happen at the worst possible moment? His hair was a mess. The gel he had painstakingly applied was now mixed with mud, and his once neat hair was sticking out in all directions. Silas felt like crying. He had tried so hard to look good, and now he looked worse than ever, and to make matters worse, Penny saw the whole thing. Silas wanted to disappear. He could feel his face turning red as Penny approached. He braced himself for laughter, or even worse, pity. This was turning out to be his worst nightmare. But then, Penny started laughing. It wasn't a mean or mocking laugh, but a genuine, hearty laugh. Silas looked up, confused. Why was she laughing? Did she find his misfortune amusing? She thought the whole thing was hilarious. Penny's laughter was infectious, and soon, Silas found himself laughing too. The tension melted away, and for a moment, they were just two friends sharing a funny moment. She even offered to help him clean up. Penny grabbed a towel from her bag and started wiping the mud off Silas's suit. Her kindness and good humor made Silas feel a lot better about the situation. Maybe Silas didn't need a fancy suit to impress Penny after all. As they walked to the dance together, Silas realized that Penny liked him for who he was, not for what he wore. And that was the best feeling in the world. Section 7, Lost and Found in the Fridge. Silas was a bit forgetful. He often misplaced things, and it had become a running joke in his family. They would always say, if Silas can't find it, it's probably in the last place he'd ever look. He lost his keys, his hat, even his shoes sometimes. It wasn't unusual to see him rummaging through the house, looking under cushions, behind doors, and in the most unexpected places. But one day, he lost something very important: his voice. It was a typical morning, or so he thought. He woke up, stretched, and went to greet the day. He woke up, opened his mouth to say good morning, and nothing came out, not a single sound. He tried again, but it was as if his voice had vanished into thin air. He tried to call for his mom, but it was no use. His voice was gone. He searched everywhere. Under his bed, in the closet, even in the bathtub. He was growing more frantic by the minute. Where could his voice be? He thought hard, retracing his steps from the previous day. He remembered talking to his friend on the phone, singing in the shower, and even whispering a secret to his pet hamster. Just when he was about to give up, he heard a faint hello coming from the kitchen. It was so soft that he almost missed it, but there it was, a tiny voice calling out to him. He opened the fridge, and there it was, his voice. It was echoing from inside the cold, dark space. He couldn't believe his ears. How did it get there? It was trapped inside a carton of milk. Silas carefully picked up the carton, and as he did, he could hear his voice more clearly. It was like his voice was swimming in the milk, trying to get out. Apparently, Silas had left the fridge open the night before while sleepwalking. He must have been talking in his sleep, and somehow, his voice got trapped in the milk carton. He was just glad to have his voice back, even if it did smell a little bit like milk. From that day on, Silas made sure to always close the fridge door and keep an eye on his voice, just in case it decided to wander off again. Section 8. The Case of the Missing Voice. Gather around, dear viewers, for a tale of mystery and intrigue that unfolded in the quaint little town of Dingleberry Lane. Dingleberry Lane was buzzing with excitement. The air was filled with the chatter of townspeople, each one eagerly discussing the upcoming festivities. The annual Dingleberry Day Festival was just around the corner. Banners were being hung, stalls were being set up, and the smell of delicious treats wafted through the air. Everyone had been working hard to prepare for the big event, but disaster struck. In the midst of all the hustle and bustle, a shocking discovery was made. The Dingleberry, the town's mascot, a giant juicy berry statue, had gone missing. The pedestal where it proudly stood was now empty, and the townspeople were in a state of panic. Silas, always the helpful one, decided to investigate. With a determined look on his face, he grabbed his trusty magnifying glass and set off to solve the mystery. He searched high and low, asking everyone if they had seen the missing Dingleberry. He questioned the baker, the blacksmith, and even the children playing in the park. Mrs. Grumbly, the town's grumpiest resident, blamed the squirrels. She was convinced they had taken the berry to their secret stash. Mr. Peabody, the local bird watcher, suspected the crows. He had seen them eyeing the berry with interest the day before. Even Mr. Whiskers the cat seemed suspicious. He had been seen sneaking around the pedestal just before the berry disappeared. Just when all hope seemed lost, Silas noticed something strange. There, on the ground near the pedestal, were tiny, almost imperceptible marks. There were tiny bite marks all over the pedestal where the dingleberry used to stand. Could it be? Silas's mind raced as he pieced together the clues. Yes, it was the ants. The industrious little creatures had worked together to steal the giant dingleberry, carrying it crumb by crumb back to their anthill. They had formed a long line, each ant taking a tiny piece of the berry and transporting it back to their home. It was a sight to behold, a testament to their strength and teamwork. The townspeople were amazed by the ants' strength and teamwork. They watched in awe as the ants continued their work, each one playing a vital role in the grand heist. They even decided to leave the dingleberry with the ants, declaring them the true heroes of Dingleberry Day. The festival went on as planned, with the ants as the guests of honor, and the townspeople celebrated their newfound appreciation for the tiny yet mighty creatures. Section 9. Dingleberry Lane, always expect the unexpected. So there you have it, just a few of the many funny stories from Dingleberry Lane. Remember, in Dingleberry Lane, the unexpected is always expected, so keep your eyes peeled and your ears open. You never know what kind of hilarious adventure might be waiting just around the corner.